Sarah Martinez clutched her worn leather backpack tighter as she walked through the crowded hallway of Lincoln High School. The bag had been her companion for 3 years, holding not just textbooks and pencils, but memories that meant everything to her. She never let it out of her sight, and her classmates had begun to notice. "What's she hiding in there?" whispered Jessica from behind her locker door. "She acts like it contains the crown jewels or something." Sarah heard the comment but kept walking. She had learned to ignore the whispers and curious stares. Her backpack was indeed special, but not for reasons anyone could guess. Inside, wrapped carefully in an old handkerchief, lay something that connected her to a past she barely remembered and a family she had lost. The morning started like any other. Sarah sat in her usual spot in the back corner of Mrs. Thompson's history class, her backpack safely tucked between her feet. She had developed this habit after years of moving between foster homes, where personal belongings had a way of disappearing. Trust came hard for someone who had learned that people could vanish from your life without warning. Mrs. Thompson was discussing World War II when Principal Davidson knocked on the classroom door. His face looked serious as he whispered something to the teacher. Sarah noticed both adults glance in her direction, and her stomach dropped. In her experience, unexpected visits from school officials never brought good news. "Sarah Martinez, please gather your things and come with me," Principal Davidson said gently. The classroom fell silent. 28 pairs of eyes followed Sarah as she slowly stood up, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Her heart pounded as she walked to the front of the room. Behind her, she could hear the excited whispers of her classmates beginning to buzz with speculation. The walk to the principal's office felt endless. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened to her current foster family, the Johnsons? They were kind people, the first in 3 years who had made her feel somewhat at home. Or worse, were they giving up on her too, like the others had? When they reached the office, Sarah was surprised to see 2 women waiting. One wore a crisp business suit and carried a briefcase. The other was older, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Neither looked like social workers, which both relieved and confused Sarah. "Sarah, this is Dr. Elizabeth Warren from the State Historical Society," Principal Davidson explained, gesturing to the woman in the suit. "And this is Mrs. Helen Rodriguez from the Veterans Affairs Office." Dr. Warren stood up and smiled warmly. "Hello, Sarah. We're here because we've been researching some historical records, and your name came up in connection with something very important. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your family history." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. She had very little information about her family. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 7, and her grandmother, who had raised her until she was 10, had passed away from cancer. After that, it was just the foster care system and fragments of memories that seemed more like dreams than reality. "I don't know much about my family," Sarah said quietly. "My grandmother used to tell me stories, but I was young. Most of what I remember might not even be true." Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward gently. "Sometimes the stories our grandmothers tell us are more accurate than we think. Do you remember her ever mentioning military service? Perhaps someone in your family who served in the war?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her backpack strap. Her grandmother had indeed told her stories about her great-grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez. She said he had been a war hero, but Sarah had always thought these were just bedtime stories meant to make her feel proud of her heritage. "She used to say my great-grandfather fought in the war," Sarah admitted. "But I never knew if it was true." Dr. Warren and Mrs. Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful look. "Sarah, we've been going through military records that were recently declassified," Dr. Warren explained. "We found documentation of a Miguel Rodriguez who served with extraordinary distinction. The records indicate he had a great-granddaughter named Sarah Martinez." Sarah felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Her great-grandfather had been a real war hero? But if that's true, Why didn't anyone ever tell me? Why aren't there any official records? That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Some military records were lost or misfiled over the years. Others were classified for various reasons. We're working to reunite families with recognition that was long overdue. Principal Davidson, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Sarah, is there anything you might have that belonged to your family? Any documents, photographs, or mementos that your grandmother might have given you? Sarah's heart began to race. She thought about the small metal object wrapped in her grandmother's handkerchief, tucked safely in the bottom compartment of her backpack. Her grandmother had given it to her the week before she died, making her promise to keep it safe always. She had said it belonged to Miguel, that it was proof of something important, but she had been very weak, and her words had been unclear. I might have something, Sarah said hesitantly, but it's very important to me. It's all I have left of my family. Of course, Dr. Warren assured her. We just want to understand what happened to your great-grandfather's military recognition. According to our research, he was recommended for a very high honor, but there's no record of him ever receiving it. Sarah looked around the room at the three adults watching her with hopeful expressions. For years, she had carried her backpack like a shield, protecting the few precious memories she had left. Now these strangers were telling her that those childhood stories might be more than just fairy tales. Her hands shook slightly as she slowly lowered her backpack from her shoulder. She had never shown anyone what was hidden in the secret compartment. Even the Johnsons, who had been nothing but kind to her, didn't know about her most treasured possession. Whatever you have, Sarah, it might help us piece together an important part of history, Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. And more importantly, it might help us give your great-grandfather the recognition he deserved. Sarah unzipped the main compartment and began removing her school books. Math textbook, science notebook, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird for English class. The adults watched patiently as she cleared everything out, her movements becoming more deliberate as she reached for the hidden zipper at the bottom of the bag. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. This is proof, mija. Proof of who we are and what we've given for this country. Keep it safe always. Sarah's fingers found the small zipper and slowly pulled it open. Inside the hidden compartment, wrapped carefully in a faded blue handkerchief, was the object that had been her secret companion for 7 years. She had looked at it countless times, wondering what it really meant, whether her grandmother's stories could possibly be true. As she unwrapped the handkerchief with trembling hands, the room fell completely silent. Even Principal Davidson, who had seen just about everything in his 30 years in education, held his breath. When the cloth fell away, a small bronze medal caught the light from the office window. It was tarnished with age, but still clearly bore an intricate design. Dr. Warren gasped audibly, and Mrs. Rodriguez stood up so quickly her chair nearly tipped over. "My God," Dr. Warren whispered, her professional composure cracking. "Is that what I think it is?" Mrs. Rodriguez moved closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Sarah, do you have any idea what you've been carrying all these years?" Sarah looked down at the medal the same way she had hundreds of times before. To her, it had always been beautiful but mysterious. The design showed an eagle with spread wings, and there were words inscribed around the edge that she had never been able to read clearly due to the tarnishing. "My grandmother said it belonged to my great-grandfather Miguel," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said it proved he was a hero." Dr. Warren pulled out a magnifying glass from her briefcase and asked permission to examine the medal more closely. As she studied the inscription, her hands began to shake. "Principal Davidson," she said, her voice tight with excitement, "I think we need to make some phone calls. This changes everything." The adults in the room were acting as if Sarah had just revealed a priceless treasure, but she didn't understand why. It was just an old medal, tarnished and worn. She had always cherished it because it connected her to her family, but watching their reactions, she began to wonder if there was something about it she didn't know. "What is it?" Sarah asked, looking from one adult to another. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Rodriguez sat back down, her face pale. "Sarah, honey, there's nothing wrong. It's just that this medal, according to our records, it was never supposed to exist." The words hung in the air like a puzzle that didn't make sense. Sarah stared at the medal in Dr. Warren's hands, her mind struggling to understand what "never supposed to exist" could possibly mean. How could something that had been with her family for decades not be supposed to exist? "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice small and confused. "My grandmother gave this to me. She said it was my great-grandfather's. How can it not be supposed to exist?" Dr. Warren carefully set the medal down on Principal Davidson's desk and pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. Her hands moved quickly through official documents, copies of military records, and old photographs. "Sarah, let me explain what we know about your great-grandfather Miguel Rodriguez." She spread several documents across the desk. According to military records, Miguel Rodriguez enlisted in 1943 at age 19. He served in the Pacific Theater, specifically in the Philippines campaign. His unit saw heavy combat, and Miguel showed exceptional bravery under fire. Sarah leaned forward, hungry for any information about the family she barely knew. These were details her grandmother had never shared, probably trying to protect a young child from the harsh realities of war. Mrs. T. Rodriguez took over the explanation. In 1945, during the Battle of Luzon, Miguel's unit was pinned down by enemy fire. According to witness statements, he single-handedly took out 3 enemy positions, saving the lives of 32 fellow soldiers. His commanding officer immediately recommended him for the Medal of Honor. Sarah's heart swelled with pride. The Medal of Honor. Even she knew that was the highest military decoration in the United States. Her great-grandfather had been recommended for the most prestigious award a soldier could receive. "But here's where it gets complicated," Dr. Warren continued, her expression growing serious. "The recommendation was filed, processed, and approved. All the paperwork went through the proper channels. Miguel Rodriguez should have received the Medal of Honor in 1945. "Should have?" Sarah repeated, sensing there was more to the story. "The medal was manufactured," Mrs. Rodriguez explained, pointing to Sarah's medal on the desk. "We have records showing it was created and engraved with Miguel's name, but according to official records, it was never presented to him. In fact, all documentation of the award recommendation mysteriously disappeared from the files." Principal Davidson, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Are you saying there was some kind of cover-up?" Dr. Warren nodded grimly. "That's exactly what we're saying, and unfortunately Miguel Rodriguez wasn't the only one. We've recently discovered that several Hispanic and African-American soldiers who were recommended for high honors during World War II had their awards mysteriously disappear from the official records." Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. "You mean they took away his medal because he was Mexican-American?" "We believe so," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "It was a different time, Sarah. Racism in the military was common, even though these men were fighting and dying for their country, just like everyone else." Sarah looked down at the medal, seeing it now with completely different eyes. This wasn't just a family heirloom. It was proof of an injustice. Her great-grandfather had earned the highest honor his country could give, but someone had decided his heritage made him unworthy of recognition. "But how did my family get the medal if it was never officially presented?" Sarah asked. Dr. Warren pulled out another document, this one handwritten and yellowed with age. "This is where your story becomes even more remarkable. We found this letter in the recently declassified files. It's from Miguel's commanding officer, Colonel James Patterson." She began to read aloud. I cannot in good conscience allow this injustice to stand. Private Miguel Rodriguez earned his medal through acts of heroism that saved the lives of my men. If the Army will not officially recognize his sacrifice, I will ensure his family knows the truth. I am personally delivering his medal to his wife, along with this letter explaining what he did and why he deserved this honor. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The colonel gave it to my great-grandmother? Yes. And according to his letter, he told her to keep it safe until the day when the truth could be told. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled softly. He probably never imagined it would take 80 years. Sarah thought about her grandmother, Rosa, who had raised her after her parents died. Rosa had always spoken of Miguel with such pride, telling stories of his courage and strength. Now Sarah understood why those stories had seemed so vivid and detailed, because Rosa had heard them directly from Miguel's commanding officer. "There's more," Dr. Warren said, pulling out a photograph. It showed a young man in military uniform standing proudly with his fellow soldiers. "This is Miguel Rodriguez, taken in the Philippines in 1945. Sarah gasped. The man in the photograph had the same dark eyes and strong jawline she saw in the mirror every day. For the first time in her life, she was looking at someone who shared her blood, someone who looked like her. "Your grandmother kept the medal and Colonel Patterson's letter safe for all these years," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "She must have known that someday someone would come looking for the truth." "But why now?" Sarah asked. "Why are you investigating this now?" Dr. Warren explained that the Defense Department had recently launched a comprehensive review of military records, specifically looking for cases where discrimination might have affected award recognition. "We're trying to right historical wrongs, Sarah. Your great-grandfather isn't the only one. We've found dozens of cases where minority soldiers were denied recognition they had earned." Sarah picked up the medal, feeling its weight differently now. This small piece of bronze represented not just her great-grandfather's courage, but decades of injustice and her family's determination to preserve the truth. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we work to get your great-grandfather the official recognition he deserved," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "With this medal and Colonel Patterson's letter, we have enough evidence to petition for a posthumous Medal of Honor presentation." Sarah felt overwhelmed. For years, she had felt like she had no real family history, no legacy to claim. Now she was learning that she came from a line of heroes, not just Miguel, but her great-grandmother, who had preserved his story, and her grandmother Rosa, who had passed it down. "There's something else," Dr. Warren said, her voice becoming more official. "If the Medal of Honor is officially awarded, there are certain benefits and recognition that come with it. Not just for Miguel's memory, but for his family." "What kind of benefits?" Principal Davidson asked. "Educational scholarships, for one. The family members of Medal of Honor recipients are eligible for full tuition assistance at any state university." Mrs. Rodriguez looked directly at Sarah. "That means you could go to college, Sarah. Any college you want." Sarah felt dizzy. College had always seemed like an impossible dream. The Johnsons had been supportive, but they were already stretching their budget to provide for her basic needs. She had assumed she would have to work after high school, maybe take community college classes at night if she was lucky. "But this will take time," Dr. Warren warned. "The military bureaucracy moves slowly, even when correcting historical injustices. It could be months or even years before the official recognition comes through." "That's okay," Sarah said, surprising herself with how strong her voice sounded. "Miguel waited 80 years for the truth to come out. I can wait a little longer." As the meeting concluded, Sarah carefully wrapped the medal back in her grandmother's handkerchief. But now she wasn't hiding it. She was protecting a piece of history that would soon receive the recognition it deserved. Dr. Warren and Mrs. Rodriguez gathered their documents, promising to stay in touch as the investigation proceeded. They took photographs of the medal and made copies of Colonel Patterson's letter, treating each piece of evidence with the reverence it deserved. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Rodriguez turned back to Sarah. "Your grandmother would be very proud of you today. You've helped uncover an important piece of history." Sarah nodded, thinking about Rosa, and how she had always insisted that their family stories were true, even when Sarah had begun to doubt them. She always said that the truth has a way of coming out eventually. After the women left, Principal Davidson walked Sarah back to class. The hallway was empty since classes were still in session, but Sarah felt different walking through it now. She wasn't just Sarah Martinez, the foster kid with the mysterious backpack anymore. She was Sarah Martinez, great-granddaughter of a war hero. When they reached her classroom door, Principal Davidson paused. "Sarah, I want you to know that what happened today doesn't just matter for historical records. What you've done takes courage, trusting people with something so precious to you." Sarah looked through the window of the classroom door. Her classmates were still taking notes on Mrs. Thompson's history lesson, completely unaware that their classmate had just become part of history herself. "I was scared," Sarah admitted. "I've never shown anyone the medal before." "Sometimes the most important things we do are the things that scare us most," Principal Davidson replied. "Your great-grandfather probably felt the same way when he charged those enemy positions." As Sarah quietly slipped back into the classroom, she realized that her backpack felt different now. It was still protecting something precious, but now it carried hope instead of just memories. For the first time in years, she felt connected not just to her past, but to her future as well. Mrs. Thompson glanced at her questioningly, but Sarah just took out her notebook and began copying down the lesson about World War II. Now she had her own war story to tell, one that had taken 80 years to begin reaching its proper conclusion. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day in Principal Davidson's office. Sarah's world had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The quiet foster kid who once hid in the back of classrooms had become something of a local celebrity, though she was still adjusting to the attention. The investigation into Miguel Rodriguez's case had moved faster than Dr. Warren had predicted. The combination of the preserved medal, Colonel Patterson's detailed letter, and newly discovered military records had created an airtight case. The Department of Defense had officially acknowledged the historical injustice and approved the posthumous Medal of Honor for Miguel Rodriguez. Sarah sat in her bedroom at the Johnsons' house, looking at the letter that had arrived that morning. The official seal of the President of the United States gleamed from the thick paper. She had read it 5 times already, but the words still seemed impossible to believe. "The President of the United States requests the honor of your presence at a ceremony to posthumously award the Medal of Honor to Private Miguel Rodriguez, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." Mrs. Johnson knocked on her door. "Sarah, honey, there's someone here to see you." Sarah looked up to find Dr. Warren standing in the doorway, holding a garment bag and smiling wider than Sarah had ever seen her. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit," Dr. Warren said, "but I wanted to deliver this personally." She held up the garment bag. "It's your dress for the ceremony. The Defense Department wanted to make sure you had something special to wear when you accept your great-grandfather's medal." Sarah carefully unzipped the bag to reveal a beautiful navy blue dress, elegant but age-appropriate. It was the nicest piece of clothing she had ever owned. "There's more," Dr. Warren continued, pulling an envelope from her briefcase. "These are the college acceptance letters we helped you submit. 3 universities have not only accepted you but offered full scholarships under the Medal of Honor family program." Sarah's hands shook as she opened the letters. Stanford, UCLA, and the University of Texas, all schools she had only dreamed about, were offering her full rides to pursue her education. The girl who had once worried about affording community college now had her choice of prestigious universities. "I can't believe this is real," Sarah whispered. "Believe it," Dr. Warren said firmly. "You've earned this, just like Miguel earned his recognition. This is your family's moment, Sarah." The ceremony was held 3 weeks later at the Pentagon, in a grand hall filled with military officials, historians, and media representatives. Sarah had never seen so many cameras and reporters in one place. The story of the hidden medal had captured national attention, becoming a symbol of the ongoing effort to address historical injustices in military recognition. Sarah wore her Navy dress and carried her great-grandfather's original medal in a small velvet pouch. She had insisted on bringing it, even though a new official medal would be presented. The original held too much family history to leave behind. As she sat in the front row between Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Sarah thought about all the people who should have been there. Miguel Rodriguez himself, who had died never knowing his heroism would be officially recognized. Her great-grandmother, who had kept the secret safe for decades. Her grandmother Rosa, who had preserved the stories and passed them down. Her parents, who had died too young to see their daughter's moment of triumph. But in a way, Sarah felt they were all there with her. Every time she touched the velvet pouch containing Miguel's medal, she felt connected to the strength and courage that ran through her family line. The ceremony began with a military honor guard presenting the colors. A chaplain offered an invocation, and then General Patricia Hayes, the highest-ranking Hispanic woman in the Army, stepped to the podium to read Miguel's citation. Private First Class Miguel Rodriguez distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving with Company B, 1st Battalion, 32nd Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division in action against enemy forces near Luzon, Philippines on March 15, 1945. As the general read the details of Miguel's heroic actions, Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine that day in 1945. Her 19-year-old great-grandfather far from home and family, making split-second decisions that would save the lives of 32 fellow soldiers. She wondered if he had been scared, if he had thought about the family he might never see again. The reading continued. Private Rodriguez's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. When the citation was complete, Sarah was called forward. Her legs felt unsteady as she approached the podium where General Hayes waited with the Medal of Honor in its presentation case. The medal gleamed under the ceremony lights, its blue ribbon pristine and new. On behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, General Hayes said in a clear, strong voice, "I present this Medal of Honor to the family of Private First Class Miguel Rodriguez, represented today by his great-granddaughter, Sarah Martinez." As the general placed the medal case in Sarah's hands, the assembly rose in thunderous applause. Sarah looked out at the standing crowd, military officers, government officials, reporters, and the Johnsons, who were both wiping tears from their eyes. But what moved her most were the other families scattered throughout the audience, families of other soldiers who had finally received long-overdue recognition. Dr. Warren had explained that Miguel's case had opened doors for dozens of other investigations. Other families had come forward with their own hidden medals, their own preserved letters, their own stories of discrimination and injustice. Miguel's medal had become the first domino in a much larger effort to correct historical wrongs. When Sarah stepped to the microphone to give her acceptance speech, her voice was surprisingly steady. She had practiced this moment, but now the words came from her heart. "I accept this medal, not just for my great-grandfather Miguel, but for all the soldiers whose heroism was overlooked because of their race or ethnicity." Miguel Rodriguez fought for a country that didn't always recognize his worth, but he fought anyway because he believed in the principles America stood for, even when America didn't live up to those principles for him. She paused, looking down at the medal case in her hands. My grandmother used to tell me that the truth always finds a way to surface, even when it takes 80 years. Today proves she was right. Miguel's heroism was never forgotten by the men he saved or by the family who preserved his story. Now it will never be forgotten by history. The applause that followed seemed to echo forever. As Sarah returned to her seat, she thought about the backpack that had started it all. For years, it had been her shield, protecting her most precious possessions from a world that often seemed unreliable. Now she understood that some treasures are meant to be shared, that hiding the truth serves no one. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by dozens of people. Other Medal of Honor families welcomed her into their community. Historians asked if she would participate in a documentary about discriminated soldiers. College recruiters reminded her of the opportunities now available to her. But the conversation that meant the most came from an elderly man who waited until most of the crowd had dispersed. He walked with a cane and wore a suit decorated with military ribbons. "Miss Martinez," he said in a voice weathered by age, "I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Robert Patterson. Colonel James Patterson was my grandfather." Sarah's eyes widened. This was the grandson of the officer who had personally delivered Miguel's medal to her family. "My grandfather left detailed journals about the war," Robert Patterson continued. "He wrote extensively about Miguel Rodriguez and the injustice of his recognition being denied. He never got over his anger about what happened." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. "I'd like you to have this. It's his journal entry from the day he delivered the medal to your great-grandmother. He wrote about how proud Miguel's family was, and how determined they were to preserve his legacy." Sarah accepted the journal with trembling hands. Inside, in faded ink, she could see her great-grandfather's name written multiple times, along with detailed accounts of his heroic actions. "Your great-grandfather made a lasting impression on my grandfather," Robert Patterson said. "He used to say that Miguel Rodriguez represented everything good about the American spirit: courage, sacrifice, and loyalty, even in the face of injustice." As the day ended and Sarah prepared to return home, she realized that her story was just beginning. The medal ceremony was not an ending, but a commencement. She had been accepted to Stanford with plans to study history and education, determined to ensure that stories like Miguel's would not be lost to future generations. Back in her bedroom that night, Sarah carefully placed both medals, Miguel's original and the new official one, on her dresser. Tomorrow she would begin the process of preparing for college, for a future that had seemed impossible just months ago. She picked up her old backpack, the one that had carried her family's secret for so many years. It looked smaller now, less important than it once had. She no longer needed to carry her treasures hidden away. Miguel's story was now part of official history, preserved forever in government records and military archives. But she kept the backpack anyway. It had taught her something important about the weight of family history and the courage required to trust others with your most precious memories. And sometimes, late at night, she would still reach for it, remembering the scared foster kid who had once hidden her greatest treasure from the world. Sarah Martinez had learned that some secrets are meant to be kept, and others are meant to be shared. The difference, she now understood, lay in knowing when the world was finally ready to hear the truth.